Hi, I'm Linda Van Hart. Welcome to the 2020 Gallery Talks. This is Wednesday night, so it's our night with fiber. We are speaking with three artists tonight. Sue Bloom, a well-known, internationally known photographer and media artist. We're talking with Catherine LaPietra, best known for her costuming and theatrical works, and Gail Matthews, who does needle felted designs. And you might ask, why is a photographer like Sue Bloom in with these other, obviously, fiber artists? And the reason for that is Sue Bloom is so well versed in documenting the fiber of her life and the lives of others, especially her travels. Sue and I've traveled practically all over the world together. And she is internationally known as the author of Digital Painting and Collage. It's been translated into 12 languages. I tell her students, especially those who are taking Sue's class for credit, she's a resume item. Taking a workshop with Sue is a resume item because if somebody in Australia was reading your resume, chances are they read a syndicated column about Sue in the Best Photography magazine being published in Australia. So just as we have many name brand musical artists, dancers, spoken word artists, we have some name brand visual artists as well. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Sue Bloom.
Unmute myself, that'll work. It's always good to be here at Common Ground, although this time it happens to be from my studio. I have a background dropped so you don't see the entire, all the rolls of paper and so forth at this point. But I do have a shot. I can share my screen, I suppose, and show you what the studio looks like. So you get, oh, wrong one came up, there we go. Can you see that? This is the studio that my husband built for me. And I've got lots of windows that I can look out to the bird feeders and so forth. You can see my desk and my Wacom big Cintiq tablet and so forth. It's there in the middle, sort of command central. And it's so wonderful to have a dedicated place. It's a separate building from my house. When my studio was in my house, it was, you know, I wasn't as productive. You walk through the kitchen and you see, oh, there's dishes that needs to go away. I need to do this. I need to do that. But when I'm in my studio, all that drops away and I am concentrating on what I'm doing. So let's get rid of that. Let's see if I can get it to go. There we go. And let's see, that was part of a class. Let's see if we can get down here at the bottom. Okay, all right, and the slideshow. So let's go back, and I put together a little slideshow for you tonight. We'll get rid of this one. Okay, it's like shuffling cards, but with shuffling screens here. So share the screen, here we go again. Bingo, and let's go up here and hit the slides. Okay. So what I did this evening is to put together a little sampler, if you would, of because I've taught a variety of classes at Common Ground. This particular week, I'm teaching one on iPhone photography. I'm doing lots of things with my iPhone. I love my iPhone. That's the camera that's always with you. So I will tell you just a little smattering of stuff. Linda mentioned the books. I've written 3 books that have to do with digital collage and digital painting and so forth, sort of the fine art end of what you can do beyond the original capture. Here's an example of that. What it jumped ahead. What do you know? I'm going to go backwards, and I don't know why it did that, but I'll go back to number 2. That should have been there. I still draw. I draw all the time. I draw from a live model every week. I used to do courtroom illustration for newspaper and television. So although I'm a photographer, as most people know me, the basics of the art are still embedded in me, and that includes drawing. So I have a couple quotes here. I won't read them for you. I'm sure you're capable of doing that. But I wanted to say that I started digitally collaging before Photoshop was ever invented. And it came as a result of getting the first iMac that came out in 1984. And I got the first scanner called a Thunderscan, and I started experimenting. In those days, a scan would take about 15 minutes. The pixels were the size of Mount Everest. They were huge. There was no inkjet printing, none of that. And so I would use the little MacWrite printer and print it on overhead transparencies, run it into my darkroom and do composites in the darkroom, where part of it was digital. As you can see, I have my daughter, who was about 8 in that shot and is now in her early 40s. So we're talking, I've been in this digital world a really long time. I'm an auntie. So what I've done is simply I have followed my nose, and I would encourage anybody in the arts to continue to see what interests them, investigate, follow your nose. And that's what led to doing these books. I had no intention of writing a book. Publisher called me up, wanted me to write one. I said, I really don't think so. I don't have enough time. I molded over for several months and finally said, okay, I'm going to be sorry if I don't do this. Jumped in. They wanted a 330-page book, and the first one came in at over 600 pages. They loved it, and it's gone on. And as Linda said, it's been good for me. Here is an example of how I collage. Here are the component parts on the left of a variety of items, and then the finished collage that's called Grace Descends. That hymnal there is in the church in Spain where Christopher Columbus is buried. Here's another example. These are all component parts. I don't sometimes have a preconceived idea, although sometimes I do. There's no hard or fast. I started out on this one in the upper left-hand corner with a stained piece of paper that I stained with tea and coffee. I threw in a variety of other kinds of elements. It wasn't working for me, and it sat for a while, and then I came back to it and revisited, and this is what eventually came out of that with all those component pieces. This is a much simpler collage that involves the Camargue horses that I've been going to the south of France to photograph for a number of years. I did and continue to do a large series that have to do with the concept of Venus, Aphrodite, idealized beauty, and that involves, I photograph interpretations of that in all the museums that I go to. Then I photograph my own models and some earth elements and combine that. So it's a little bit of all those things. I'm also very involved, especially now in retirement, on doing family genealogy, and I love old photos. And I've been putting together some family collages that are more personal for me that involve, in this one, there's a map, there's a census, there's an old Bible, there are old photos and so forth. And there is a class that I've taught at Common Ground, and maybe we'll do it again, where I teach people how to take your old photos and fix them up. Here's another series that I've been doing that was inspired by Monet. I've gone to his gardens and homes several times, was there just last year. And I've been photographing close-ups of the brushwork, all Monet paintings, and then combining it with my love of that same subject matter and putting sort of our hands together in the same piece. I mean, Monet didn't live in the same time frame that I'm in, but I like the idea that somehow across time we can connect in that kind of way. This is Monet's gardens there at Giverny. Last year when I was there, it rained and it rained and it rained. I sort of, again, follow my nose. One day I was out in the car, stumbled on a group of fox hunters. This has been about maybe 20, 25 years ago. And I recognized one of them, asked if I could come along. And that has started a long progressive series that involves these people that are fox hunters and photographing them and then often turning those into digital paintings. This is a piece I used for the cover of my second book about painting with Photoshop. And this is entirely painted in Photoshop by hand, no photograph involved here. And I did it so that it had a 3D impasto kind of look. This is when I threw in, it's a still life I did this spring, again, using layers and textures and so forth, just the flowers here for my garden. I'm finding with us all being quarantined at home that I'm really enjoying my garden this year more than ever before. Another thing that I've been photographing over probably about 10 years is rodeos and bull riding. There's actually a group up just over the Frederick border in Liberty Town that rides during the summer, and I enjoy doing action shots with them. Interesting people, but it's not running this summer. I am really squeamish. I don't even hold the dog at the vet's for shots, so I wasn't sure I could carry through on my idea to photograph this family outside of New Windsor that lives on the property that their ancestors have had for over 200 years. And they have still use the same smokehouse. They still use implements and the techniques that what their ancestors used for generation after generation. I thought, I really need to photograph these people. I mean, there aren't that many families in Carroll County that still do their own butchering. So it's a 3-day process, and they allow me to come in and photograph them. And I've been able to do it. I usually teach in the summertime at the Maine Media Workshop up in Maine. I will be doing it virtually this year. All my classes and all the different places I teach have all gone online. One of the places I visit over and over again is Port Clyde in Maine. This little piece I did with infrared. I often shoot with infrared photography. And this is in Port Clyde, Maine. And while I'm there, I always visit this little lobsterman's cottage that's on the edge of this little cove. And I photograph it every time I go up. I think it's important to go back to places over and over again. You bring a different kind of understanding to what you're doing, and places change. So a couple years ago when I was up there snooping around photographing, all of a sudden I heard Johnny Cash, a Johnny Cash song. I was like, where's that coming from? Well, the lobsterman was home. And so I introduced myself, told him I've been photographing him for years, gave him prints. He said, come on in. And so there's the lobsterman as well. You never know what things where it'll lead you. I don't know whether Civil War reenactments, giving the climate of how the nation is feeling now, will be a thing that will continue in the future. Only time will tell, I suppose. But I've gone to quite a few and photographed there. Again, I find the people in costume and reenacting, I love history, is an interesting thing. And I usually go back, give them prints, talk to them. They tend to be really lovely people. The guy on the left, after I got to know him, he said, here, take some of this. He made hardtack, the way the soldiers, the same stuff that they ate during the Civil War. So I got to try some of his hardtack. Linda's been with me to Florence. This is the Epiphany Parade in Florence one year. I love, 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 love Florence, and gone to Italy just lots and lots of times. And although I am not a portrait photographer, although that's what I'm teaching this, the iPhone photography this particular week, I do enjoy it. And we've been talking about different ways to look at that with my class this week. Because I'm a grandma now and I love photographing my grandkids, photographing your family is something that I've encouraged my students to do, especially during the times when we don't have access to lots of other people. These are grandkids photos. Unfortunately, I lost my mom last August, and I took this a couple days before she passed, knowing she was going to go and that I would not be able to photograph her again. So again, I would encourage anybody to photograph all the time. You just never know. This is the island of Capri. It's a digital painting. And then we've been talking in my class about framing elements within photos. And this is a good example in Sintra in Portugal. Again, I'd like to travel. I mentioned the Camargue area in the south of France. This is the Camargue. And I go down there, and it's inhabited by the Roma people. We would know them as gypsies, I suppose. But this is a typical Roma house with a thatched roof. And this gentleman manages a herd of these wild ride horses. And so I had gone with 2 photography friends, and we arranged with him to get a couple more cowboys. They're called guardians in that area. And they use these white horses to corral and work with the big Iberian bulls they raise in that area for the bullfights. And so he came before dawn in the Mediterranean there with a herd of horses. And it was just, I've done it a couple times now. It's just magical. And so here are a couple from that. This last time my feet were so stuck in that mud and the horses are thundering at me. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I have to move, I'm stuck. I can't move my feet, but I survived. Lots of iPhone photos that I put into this presentation because I'm loving my iPhone and the things that we can do with it. These are all iPhone shots. The one on the left taken in Roussillon, France, a year and a half ago, sitting eating lunch, and I keep watching that shadow on the wall across from me. And I took several shots waiting for that shadow to move. Sometimes you just have to be patient in photography. I love the Dordogne region of France, and the last time I was there, I stayed with some people that had lived there for a while. They have a lavender farm, and they let me know that in some of the tiny little villages, there are these abandoned churches. Some of them you wouldn't even know it was a church from the outside. They're really, really tiny. And she was able to tell me, you go over on such and such a porch, you lift up the flower pot, there's a key in there and it'll get you in. Some of the churches haven't been used for worship for hundreds of years. I found several that had frescoes in it. The paint just as fresh could be, just a really moving kind of experience. So there is a little bit of that. Besides being enthralled with Monet, I'm also quite in love with the work of Vincent van Gogh, and or as the French say, they sort of choke it in the back of their throat. And this is the asylum where he lived in the south of France for a while. I'm in his room. That's the bars on the window. They have a statue of him out front with a sunflower. The first time I went there many years ago, probably 30 years ago, it was still an asylum and you could hear people in there. You couldn't go up to his room. Now I'm looking out of the window of his bedroom there. And I ran into a woman across the street that she remembered her grandmother talking about a little red-haired fellow that would come across the street to paint. So this past year I went to the village where he died. He was there the last few months of his life, and it is this village. And but we believe that his last painting had these crows flying. And I was there at the exact same time of year with the poppies and so forth, but there weren't any birds available that day. So I used a little artistic license and added them. One of the things about using the iPhone and all the different apps that are out there now is that sometimes I'll fall in love with an app, then the manufacturer doesn't want to upgrade it when the next operating system comes out. And that's the case with a few of these from Italy, which was an app that I absolutely loved and no longer can I get. And it's a shame. So these are a few from Italy. Linda, were you with me when we went to San Marino? Yes, yes, good. I thought so, but I wasn't altogether sure. But you don't have to travel abroad. You can travel around the corner. This is a little bit further down the road. This is Charleston, South Carolina. I was supposed to go there in March, and of course, everything went to hell in a handbasket quickly. I taught a workshop there last year. Love that area. I shoot lots of panoramics. This is a pano there at Magnolia Plantation. This one was a proof in the pudding kind of shot for me. I'm in a moving car. I'm not driving. I'm shooting with my cell phone out the window, and the car's moving, not real fast. We're in downtown Savannah. But I was able to get this sharp a shot with a cell phone from a moving car. Like, oh my goodness, it just sort of blew me away. So I spend a lot of time in Maine in the summer. Here are some shots from Maine. Again, I go back in and do a lot of work on the images, often in my phone, after the fact to make it sort of more what I see in my mind's eye. So these are Maine, Mohegan Island. I love it. I go out with the mailboat real early in the morning, usually spend the night. There are only 2 places on the island that you can stay overnight. And one of them turns the electricity off at 10 o'clock. You better be done. So this is Mohegan. And Jamie Wyatt has a place out there. Here's another main shot. Here's down the road in Chincoteague, you know, where the ponies are and so forth. Lovely, lovely place. I like to go the road least traveled. If there's a path off to the side, I'm going to go down the path off the side. Happened to find these old gas pumps that were all intertwined. And then the one on the right, I just did recently. I was going to pick up some flowers in the morning from a nursery. It was foggy, the sun was coming up, the lamb was glistening. Just, I pull over. I pull over all the time. My poor husband, he knows. I said, pull over, pull over. And so I want to leave you with this thought, because I like to follow my nose, but sometimes my nose isn't pointed in the right direction. So I had a friend with me. We're photographing again down in Charleston, and she's saying, Sue, turn around, turn around. But I'm concentrating, you know, on what I'm photographing, not realizing I got this peacock behind me, and actually the photo was behind me. So I often say to students, turn around. Sometimes the photo is behind you. And so I'll leave you with this little quote. I would love to meet with you folks and hope that at some point I'll get you in my class and we can follow our noses together. That's it. All right.
Thank you, Sue.
Welcome.
Wonderful as always, traveling with your imagination and your skill. Sue explores the very fiber of life wherever she is. We'll move on now to Catherine and talk about actual fiber, perhaps some sewing, some designing for fiber, perhaps some costuming. Take it away, Catherine.
Okay, hi, thank you, Linda. Thank you, Sue. So as Linda said, I am a costumer. I work at a crazy university in Michigan. So way the heck everywhere other than here or other than there, but everybody's everywhere these days. So that's a good thing. As a costumer, I often have to work within a limited budget, a limited amount of time, hopefully with enough creativity, but I am known specifically around Common Ground when I'm not making puppets for making things out of other things. And that's kind of what I do. So for instance, I make armor out of placemats and cover up my face with them. I make jewelry tiaras out of icky green lace. That's what I do. And so if I can share the screen, if Carol has enabled me to share the screen, I will show you some bigger examples. There we go. So that's backwards or inside out or something. Hold on just a second. Come on, move this so I can move that. There we go. All right, so some of you may recognize the lady in this photograph. This is Miss Ivy Allgaier. I made her a STEM punk, not a steampunk, a STEM punk outfit so that she could do it for her STEM outlet for class. And you can see over here what I made it out of. Leggings, a jacket, those are the normal things, a placemat, and a bed ruffle. Okay, so the bed ruffle is the bustle, the jacket's a jacket. The placemat, you can't really see, it's the peplum on and the waistband on the skirt. But that's what I do. It is partially out of necessity and partially out of, it's just a lot of fun that way to see something and see something somebody would see in a normal circumstances and see it as something else. So I often go through the Goodwill and go, oh, wait a minute, that's a doublet or whatever. So that's kind of what I do. So that's those examples. So these examples, some of you have seen in the gallery. Speaking of things out of found art, this is a puppet made out of one of those screens you put in front of your window for your car. That's literally, that's what that's made out of. This is an Elizabethan doublet made out of a lady's jacket. This is a costume for the Lady of the Lake for Spamalot. For those of you that know Spamalot, it's the musical version of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Basically based off of a bra. This is an Elizabethan outfit made out of a jacket, a shower curtain, and a sheet. And the jewelry is again made out of lace because that's the easiest way to do it. This is another sort of steampunk outfit made out of somewhat conventional clothing, but if you look down at the bottom, you will see that the shower curtain rings are still on the bottom of the shower curtain. That's my dog, just ignore him if you can, although he is cute. And his name is Buford, and he is a theater dog. So these are what my students have made, and this is what I am exceptionally proud. So these are 3 of my students who made their outfits out of, in Sammy's case, a jacket and 3 dresses. In this case, I've got to remember, it's a placemat for her stomacher, tablecloth, another tablecloth, and a sheet. And Sarah's is, her stomacher is out of a quilted placemat, a bunch of dresses, a sheet, not a bunch of dresses, a dress, inside out, and a men's jacket. That's what I do. Sorry, I'm also losing my voice. I'm not quite sure why. Linda said, hey, show people your studio. I don't have a studio. I have a costume nook. It's at Ferris. I'm not allowed to be at Ferris at the moment because of COVID. They don't want us on campus. And it is lovely and full of junk and full of thread and various sundry things like this. And if you actually saw my house right now, which I refuse to show you, you would see that it is full of thread and patterns and weird things like that, simply because since I can't work in my studio, I have to work in my house, which means it's a mess. But creativity is messy, or can be messy, and that's kind of what I do. And I warned Linda that I wasn't going to be able to take up 15 minutes because I don't even know why but one of the things about a costume is out of necessity. And when you don't have the necessity, it's hard to explain it. My biggest thing with costumes is you've got to be able to wear them. They can't just be pretty, and they have to reflect the character. So all of these reflect their characters. At least I hope so. So I wish I could ask for questions because I think that would help me fill up my time. But Linda was so quick in introducing me that I couldn't even check what time I started or start my timer, which I even set up on my phone, which I was proud of myself for. So somebody tell me how much time I'm supposed to try to prattle on.
You're
At least I
okay.
made somebody laugh.
You're okay.
I'm okay. Can I stop now?
Okay. Thank you, Catherine LaPietra, the costumer who one of your courses was called on a shoestring budget, and that
Right.
was very appropriate. Catherine encourages people to really envision things in a different way. Nothing is what it seems to be made for in a Catherine costume. We've got to get those puppets coming back because that was always really a fun class. Catherine's usually with us 2 weeks out of the summer. And during that time, she encourages such creativity. It's wonderful to see what her students make because everybody's familiar with Renaissance festivals, no matter what state you live in. And a lot of people have this bucket list. They want to attend in full Renaissance regalia sometime in their life. So Catherine has helped many of those people realize those dreams and create a Renaissance style costume for no money. A couple of dollars at the Goodwill or a used clothing shop, or using stuff that they were getting ready to give to Goodwill, and all of a sudden it changes its purpose. Upcycling.
Upcycling. Yeah, that sounds better. That sounds better. Upcycling. But yes, Thank you, Linda. That is a nice way of explaining me and why I go through the dollar store and see bright red loofah sponges and turn them into Queen Elizabeth hair for a puppet.
Exactly. I loved the puppet made out of the sunscreen for the car. That one was really, really wonderful.
Thank you. Well, you know, what else are you going to build a Knigget out of? Can't call them knights. You have to call them Kniggets. If you're a Monty Python fan, you call them Kniggets.
Well, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, and thank you for understanding my craziness.
Refreshing use of fiber. We'll go on to Gail. Gail is currently one of my partners at Off Track Art. We keep art at the heart of downtown Westminster. I guess I met Gail at the long-lasting Mistletoe Mart, which very sadly is not happening this year. It's kind of a community resource. It's a community tradition. And very sadly, along with many other things, that's been canceled. But we just marveled over Gail's creations with this needle felting technique. She creates animals that have so much life and so much personality. You almost feel that they're animated, that they could move or make noise at any moment. She's teaching with us at Common Ground for the first time this summer, very bravely setting up a studio from which she could broadcast from home. And we're going to visit Gail Matthews in her studio right now. Take it away, Gail.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it. I thank you for that introduction. Wool is what I work with, and wool is cool. Wool is also hot. The properties of wool are amazing. Wool is warmer than other fibers. It also can cool you better than some fibers. It's hypoallergenic. It is mold and mildew resistant. It repels soiling. It's fire resistant. It moisture wicks. It's flexible and breathable. It is environmentally safe. It is unique. It has unique properties of felting, which is pertains exactly to what I do. It takes dyes beautifully, and I'm just gonna hold up some colors. These are locks that have come right off the sheep. You can see the curl in them. That's a pretty fuchsia color. I've got a beautiful green. The colors are rich and saturated, and that's one of the really neat things about wool is that it takes dye beautifully, as opposed to silk, which is often resistant, especially the silk hankies, which are actually the cocoons of silkworms, that they don't take dye as well. It's odor resistant, it's anti-static, it is sun safe, and it is obviously a renewable source, because there's always going to be sheep and you always have to shear them. So it's a renewable source. Just want to show you what we've done today. What we are going to start tomorrow is this little, I call him a market bunny. He's got a great big head of lettuce or cabbage. He's hanging on to that. He's kind of stooped over like a little old man. He's on a wire armature, and here's another one similar, a smaller version, and he has a big giant carrot in his hand. He's a little bit different structure, and everybody in my class today finished this little wild rabbit, with each one probably had their different positions. His arms are out and they are able to come together, and I can either put something in his arm to hold or cross his arms here. My journey with needle felting has been kind of in fits and starts. I was looking at, I knit, and I've always been interested in fiber. I knit, I sew, I work with silk ribbon. I do silk ribbon embroidery. I've done needlepoint. I've done cross stitch. I've done regular embroidery. If it's fabric, I probably have done it. But this was brand new to me. I was looking at a knitting website, and that website was advertising a book on needle felting. And I looked at that and I go, oh my goodness, look at those cute animals. How did they do that? So I got to investigating a little bit. I never did buy the book, but I did find a couple websites that had free video tutorials. And I started slowly purchasing supply packs for those and watching them, and doing, gathering my equipment, which includes extremely sharp needles. This needle is, from this point on, has cutouts in it. You might call cutouts. They are either a star or a twist, a spiral, and they come to an extremely sharp point here. And what happens is when you put the point of the needle into the wool, it grabs it and tangles it. Wool itself, like this piece of what we call core wool, is full of air. It's just full of air. And when you needle felt, what you do is you condense the fibers, you twist the fibers, you tangle the fibers, you condense the fibers. The air is removed slowly as you plunge your needle in and out, in and out, in and out. And it's also extremely sculptable or shapeable. And that is the beauty of needle felting. I thought I turned that on. I never did. My timer. Needle felting 3D animals, like what we've done this week. They start out looking very odd because there's no color on it. That's the beginnings of a head. We got an arm here, or a leg, as the case may be, and you can see that it's just really nothing. But when you start putting all your pieces together and you start shaping, forming, sculpting, and then you put the top coat on, which would be the fur, all of a sudden out pops a rabbit, a fox, whatever. And it's just really magical. Now, in addition to the 3D animal sculpting, I'm getting into another form of using wool, and I'm going to show you just two examples, and then we'll go on to the slide presentation. Get it right side up. This is a picture that I've more or less taken off from a calendar. It's a door in Italy, and these are all applied. All these stones are just put in individually. The original picture was more stucco, and I turned it into more cobblestone. This is very incomplete, but this is what I would call 2D dry needle felting. I still have a long way to go. This is all going to be a flower trellis in here, roses. There has to be shading with the curtains, and the curtains actually have to be corrected a little bit. So this is 2D, two-dimensional dry needle felting, quite a departure from the 3D animals. And the other thing that you can do with wool, a completely different technique, is wet felting. Wet felting is fascinating because you really never know what you're going to get. So you build up layers and layers and layers of wool, primarily merino. Merino felts the best for wet felting, which we'll talk about the different types of wool in just a minute. But layers and layers, and your pile of wool, as you add your colors and your shapes, your design, is probably about 2.5 to 3 inches thick. And then you do a process of wetting it and hand felting it with your hands for a while. And then you begin to roll it, roll it, roll it, roll it, roll it. And then eventually, as you can see, it felts down to something, about a quarter of an inch to maybe a half an inch in the middle thick. So it's a very long and involved process. And that can be embellished with any kind of beading, embroidery work. It could be quite time consuming, but the results would be very beautiful. You can felt anything. You can do figures, you can do like a still life items, fruit, vegetables. You can do, people a lot of do mushrooms, they do fantasy creatures, they do popular creatures like little dolls and little like troll dolls and anything that's recognizable. Up until this recently, I've kind of stuck with the animals because that's what I learned to do first. But as I branch out and realize that the world of felting is very, very wide, I have branched out into the dry needle felting and the wet felting, which is the possibilities for that are endless. Behind me, you see a quarter of my stash of wool. Then I have obviously 3 more quarters with that much wool. I have probably close to 450 different colors and types of wool. And it's taken a long time to build up that much stock, but when you go to wet felt, you need certain kinds of wool and you want lots of colors. If you dry felt or do the 3D sculptures, you want mostly the wild animal colors, the browns, the tans, unless you're doing something really bright like a parrot or a bird that would be have bright plumage. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of the other things that I've made over the last year or so. And this is like I said, this is a project that we finished today. And the little bunny is sitting on that tapestry like wet felted piece that I just showed you. Our class spent 3 days. We finished him today. This is not a quick art form. It is quite time intensive. Every piece of that little bunny, his thigh, his paws, his back, his tail, his chest, his ears, his nose, and all the features on his face is individual. And then we put it together. That's the style for that bunny. Okay, next please, Carol. This is a cute little sculpture that I did, a little lamb for springtime. And springtime for us, I guess, as a country just really didn't happen. So there she is, sitting on her little carpet of flowers. There's a little sleepy kitty. Once again, the way this was constructed is the same way we did our little bunnies today. All those separate pieces are made separately and then attached to each other, which is a different process from using a wire armature. 2 little squirrels talking to each other and a frog. The frog, Carol could, yes, the frog is a 2-step process. His skin, his outer skin and his belly skin, that's wet felted. And then he has a base with the core wool made to look like the frog shape, but then the colored skin is applied afterwards. That's pretty time intensive. Okay, thank you. Is there any more? Oh, this is a picture of another side of my stash. So you can see what a wool addiction looks like. Okay, thank you. This is my mermaid waiting for her hair. A lot of people do 2D portraits, pet portraits. This is a 3D sculpture. Learning how to do the face parts is really rather challenging, to get the proportion of the the face so that your eyes are not up on the top of your head, and get enough chin and so on and so forth. But her hair is all going to be the curls, the natural curls that have been dyed. I chose red for this one. It's really fun to branch out from animals to do something like a human figure. I really enjoyed that. Her fins and her lower skin, fish skin, was wet felted. So this is a project that combined both the dry needle felting 3D and then wet felting, and applying the wet felted fabric and shape it onto the body that you made as a base. Okay. This is a little schnauzer dog that I made for a friend's mother, and I thought he turned out really well. And this is a bumblebee. The wings are a product called Angelina, and Angelina is not a fiber as such. It's more of a metallic substance, and if you iron it, it will melt together, and so that's how I made those wings. You notice that the legs and the antenna are not felted. They are actually felted, but they're covered with wax, and so that's shapeable also. And I don't know, yes, I think we have one more. Oh, two more. Little sleepy fawns. Now, I do take tutorials from other instructors online, and this particular project was from The Wishing Shed by a young woman in England named Rachel Austin. But she only had one leg on her little sleepy deer, and I wanted my sleepy deers to have two. So I kind of added to what she had done, which is what I think most artists would not want to copy what somebody else has done slavishly at all, but to borrow from it and then make it your work by adding, subtracting, doing something different. And that's what I like to do. Okay, there is a bear and my Highland cow. I really like my Highland cow. The technique on the horns is there's wire under there, or it could be pipe cleaners, can't remember now, and then wrapped in wool. And then to get that hard horn appearance, there's a mixture of glue and water. It's glue watered down and then applied with your fingers or brush to get them to be upright and more or less shiny. The hooves also are wax, so you can see that even though it's 99% wool, I do use a couple other products: wire for the armatures, wax for feet, noses, and some glue once in a while. All of the eyes are felted. There are no glass eyes or purchased eyes in any of my work at this point. So I don't know how much time I have left. This is a craft, which is actually an art, which is actually a craft. It's trying to debate, is this an art or is this a craft? I think it's both. It's a lot of fun. It's time consuming. The sky is the limit with your imagination. And really you can make just about anything out of felt, sculpting it with needles. You need tools. This is a tool that holds 3 needles. This is a tool that holds 5 needles, which helps make your work go faster. And then I have other tools to make shapes that I've purchased along the way. This is an art / craft that is highly rewarding, very frustrating, quite time consuming, and highly addictive. And I think that's probably about all I have to say. And I have really appreciated the opportunity to share my passion for wool sculptures. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. That was wonderful. And I think our audience can tell that you all are very passionate about exploring fiber in your life, no matter what type it is. With Sue, it's the actual life experience and capturing that. With Catherine, it's upcycling and the imagination that comes from re-envisioning the purpose of something found and turning it into something wonderful and usable. And with Gail, creating a whole world out of wool. That's really fantastic. It's so good to know more about your work, Gail.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're midway in both week 2 and in the 3 weeks of Common Ground tonight. Tomorrow night, we're looking at public art. Phil Gratt will kick us off. Many of you have taken Phil's class over the years. Phil's so popular, he has to teach all 3 weeks. And his class is Phil in the drop. As soon as we open registration, Phil's class is Phil. He's been a photojournalist for over 40 years. And so although he works in the field of photography, his work is very public because he publishes it, either in a newspaper, a magazine. Carol Magazine often commissions him to do their cover photos. So Phil will kick off our evening of public art. Michael Sipe, our Baltimore screen painter, back by popular demand. He was with us last year. A few years ago, some of you may remember John Iampieri, probably the most famous of our Maryland, Baltimore screen painters. And John is joining Michael in a show Michael's curating at Off Track Art, beginning in March, I think, of the Baltimore Screen Painting Society. So don't miss that if you live locally. Michael will be talking to you about a very treasured art form that one of the many ways Baltimore has been put on everybody's map, because it's a cultural wonder. And Tom Sterner will be talking to us about how public sculpture comes into being. There's a whole process, and it seems like every once in a while, like downtown Westminster, we had these sprouts appear by the bank, right in the middle of downtown Westminster, and people were saying, "What is that? How did that get here?" Well, Tom Stern is going to elucidate the methods that sculptors go through to bring their ideas, their sculptural ideas, to the public. Please don't miss it. That's going to be just a wonderful night. Friday is our awards presentation. We kick off the last concert of week 2. We are honoring 2 treasures. Janet Kozacek hasn't been able to be with us for a while because of a very mysterious and daunting illness. And unfortunately, the year she came back, COVID was here. So we are not in person with Janet, but we want to honor her for her excellence in her art form, her many publications, her brilliance about interpreting all things Chinese, and her social activism. And we're also honoring our flute player, Robin Tillery. We missed Robin and his wonderful flute playing, opening all of our ceremonies and many of our performances. Robin, of course, spent quite a while understudying flute making and playing with Sakim, who was teaching online with us the very first week. So don't miss any of those wonderful things. Our award ceremony will lead into our final concert for the week, featuring all of our instructors, some of our students performing. And unfortunately, we won't have a festival this year. You'll just have to be patient and wait, hopefully with fingers crossed, that we can gather in person next year. There's still time to register for classes for week 3 if you just haven't gotten enough. We do have several classes with open spaces in them. You are also welcome to take Common Ground for credit. We have many teachers with us who do just that so that they can maintain their certification to teach. So however you're enjoying Common Ground, please continue to do so. Join us tomorrow night for our talk on public sculpture. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on our discussion of fiber and photographing the fiber of your life. I'm Linda Van Hart, Visual Arts Coordinator for Common Ground on the Hill. I welcome you to each and every gallery talk, 6:30 to 7:30 every night. Thank you very much.